Welcome back. Over the last few weeks, 2 Michigan moms have had to face judges in custody cases over whether or not they should be required to vaccinate their children.
Joining us now to discuss this topic, Dr. James Neuenschwander. He is of the Bioenergy Medical Center in Ann Arbor. He specializes in the treatment of chronic illnesses and is currently anti-vaccine. Next to him, Joel Dorfman, spokesperson for the Michigan for Vaccine Choice. He helps parents navigate the waivers. We'll talk about that in a moment. On the other side then, we have Dr. Mark Navin, Associate Professor of Philosophy at Oakland University, whose research focuses on ethics, politics, and effectiveness of vaccine policy. And last, the other Mark here. So it's the 2 Marks. Make it easy right there. He's an OBGYN. He knows that vaccines are effective and safe. Let me start with Dr. James Neuenschwander. Am I pronouncing that correctly? I certainly hope so. Aren't there risks? Are there chances that, let me make it easy for you. Are vaccines safe?
Well, the safety of vaccines is thought to be, in general use, most physicians will feel that they're safe, but when you actually dig into the evidence, you have the Institute of Medicine that has looked at the safety of the entire vaccine schedule and came back with a verdict that there's not enough evidence to determine one way or the other whether or not they're safe. There's very, very few studies out there that are vaccinated versus unvaccinated populations, and the one that was there showed that there was increased risk with these vaccines.
Let me ask Joel, though, haven't we determined that vaccines predominantly have almost eliminated measles, mumps, whooping cough, smallpox, and I could go on? True?
Well, most of these illnesses you're talking about were in significant decline before the vaccines that were targeted at them ever came into existence. So that's a bit of a myth that, though, we're eliminated by that. And to go back to your safety issue, it's irrefutable that vaccines have significant risks associated with them. In 1986, Congress passed a law removing any liability for injury from immunization. So an injured party cannot sue the pharmaceutical company that prepared that vaccine. If they're all that safe, why do they need that protection?
That question that we'll ask to you. If
why
they
do we
are
have
safe,
reporting of the VAERS report continuing on that have tens of thousands of reports? The CDC said it's only 10% of them, and FDA thinks it's 1%.
Dr. Trump in there.
Just one last point. Why do we have a court of claims that's paid out billions of dollars for injuries?
Because lobbyists for the pharmaceutical company are very, very good, and no drugs can get, you can't sue drug companies. But
they're saying a lie makes it halfway around the world before the truth puts on its shoes. And so there's a lot already said, right? But you should know there's robust evidence there's a net benefit for every vaccine that's on the schedule. You should also know the reason there aren't population studies for the long-term effects of vaccinated populations versus not. It's for the same reason there aren't long-term studies about what happens for populations that use seatbelts and not. We know that vaccines are so effective, it would be unethical to maintain a control group over decades of people who are not vaccinated. To the issue of the vaccine court, the reason that exists is because in the 1980s there were a number of frivolous claims against vaccine manufacturers because of supposed injuries from pertussis vaccine, which we know now were not real injuries. But in response, jury trials were awarding significant damages against pharmaceutical companies, and those companies were then leaving the market, which were going to leave our country without a source of vaccines necessary for public health. That's why the system exists.
Dr. Mark,
go back to the 1950s. Who was in favor of giving polio? You either die or you're crippled. Who was in favor of infecting a pregnant mother with rubella who gets a special needs child that can't hear? Who's in favor of that? We've eliminated that essentially. We've eliminated that.
I've read somewhere that the vaccines, though, Dr. Warner, could cause autism. Is that true? You have an autistic child.
I have an autistic son. There's no evidence that that's the case. Now, it is true that back in the 50s and 60s, there were 11 vaccines. Now we have 32. Okay, they've looked at those numbers. But a lot of times, a lot of the parents, they don't remember the 50s. They weren't even born in the 50s. They don't remember when pregnant moms, look at Zika virus right now. Everybody's afraid of Zika virus. If we had a vaccine against that, we could help a lot of babies that have small special needs.
Doctor.
Okay, first of all, just to the point of a vax versus unvax study. Right now we have the vaccine safety data link. Federal government would be readily able to study this simply with the data they already have. There's enough non-vax vaccinated children in the pipeline that they could determine is there a risk or not risk for these vaccines. Secondly, the few studies that they have done that have been published with a vaccinated versus unvaccinated population, there's really only been one.
What are the chances? What are the percentage, though, if children that would get injured somehow if they get a vaccine?
If you look at vaccine injury reporting, if you go in, this is a voluntary program, most of these things are not reported. There was a study done by Harvard where they actually had automated everything so that they know every child that was injured by a vaccine. Out of 375,000 kids, 35,000 injuries were reported. That's a 10% rate. This is not insignificant.
The central point, though, for the vaccine versus advanced reporting system is that it's reported by parents or providers or others voluntarily. And we know that many parents believe their children have suffered vaccine injuries when they in fact haven't. And the VAERS system allows that. In fact, the so-called vaccine court.
But he says at least 10%.
There's no evidence. There's no evidence.
Okay, whoa. This is published evidence from Harvard.
Why should there's no evidence of that be allowed to fly? Something either is or it is not. Why don't we know for sure?
Listen, go to ICANDecide.com. There's a white paper. All the evidence is right there.
I mean, the relevant question is the policy, right, and about the rights that parents have. And I think that actually is the more interesting question.
Can I, Dr. Wakefield did a study, and it refuted it. He had 12 patients that said that autism was from vaccines. It refuted that case. The second thing is they looked at thimerosal, which is mercury, which is a preservative in the vaccines that they took out. There's no evidence that thimerosal caused injury from vaccines. And then they looked at the volume of vaccines, 32 versus 11. Did that cause autism or injury? And they found that it did.
Let me bring in Dr. Maven real quick, though. If the policy is in this state that pretty much if I as a parent do not want to vaccinate my child, I don't really have to. A religious belief, I can just not vaccinate. What's wrong with that?
Well, that's actually the law, right? So we should distinguish two things, right? So the law in no state in the country makes you a criminal if you refuse to vaccinate. That's compulsory vaccination. Only some states have ever had that in the 19th
You're not
century.
advocating that.
No one advocates that. What we have now is something called mandatory vaccination, which states you have to vaccinate in order to, in our state, attend schools or daycares. But of course, you can opt out of that if you have a religious or personal belief, sometimes called a philosophical reason. And one of the main debates Michigan has had.
But what should parents look to, though? We know the law, they're vaccinated. But what should they look to? Joel, let me bring you in on here. What should parents look to, whether they're deciding whether or not to vaccinate or not vaccinate?
Well, parents should be knowledgeable about the subject. They should evaluate the benefits.
What do they look to?
Well, they can look to the CDC information that's on their own website. They can look at the National Vaccine Information Center. They can go to Michigan for Vaccine Choices Center. They can look and get informed information about the benefits and the risks, because few people, including the counties in this state and the state of Michigan, enunciate what the risks are.
But if you have
they only
doctors
want to
on
discuss
both sides advocating both, how do you know which?
Well, the point is there are risks, and if there are risks, you should be able to make your own choice.
Well, and there are both sides.
And doctors should present what constitutes informed consent. This is the only medical intervention on a healthy person for which no informed consent is provided.
You said there aren't two sides?
We'll give the last 10 seconds. Wrap it up there. Okay.
But there are two sides in the same way there aren't two sides about climate change, right? In the same way that 97% of climate scientists embrace climate change science, so too do 97, 99% of physicians
But the common belief is that it's political.
In 1492, there was a consensus among scientists that the Earth was flat.
No, there wasn't. That's
All right, the world was flat at some point. All right, coming up next, we're going to share your thoughts on the air. We will be right back.
That's not true. That's not.
All right, welcome back. Now it's time for you to be a part of the discussion using the hashtag #LetItRip. Dr. Mark Naven, first question to you. So if a child gets injured, then no one's accountable for it? That's BS. That's coming from Frederick.
So, well, if a child is injured, they can go through the vaccine adverse events reporting system. The vaccine court, as the other columnists have said, or panelists have said, have paid out billions of dollars in awards for vaccine injuries.
Let me get Joel over here. Joel Dorfman, this is from the Urban Existence. He says it's crazy that there are measles outbreaks because people don't want to vaccinate their children. How do you respond to that?
Well, most of these illnesses are benign to begin with, and it often is the case that children are immunized and they never obtain any immunity. In fact, in Traverse City, there was an event in 2014 where 85% of the kids were fully vaccinated for pertussis. It's happening right now in Syracuse. You have 14 children who have the mumps, all of them fully vaccinated. So we have a situation where there are more children that are vaccinated that never obtain immunity than those who
All right,
are
let's get
vaccinated.
another
Short
question.
answer, Dr. Mark. All right, or Dr. Mark, next question to you, this one from Brian. I've read on the internet that vaccines are dangerous. I mean, if it's on the internet, it must be true, right? Sorry, but I'll give my word to the medical doctor first. How do you fight against all the information that's out there, and no one really knows where it comes from, but that's what people believe?
Right, there's one case, 1 in a million, 1 in 500,000, but overall it's very, very safe. You could say that about anything medical. There is some risk to everything, but the majority, like over 1 in 500,000 or 1 in a million, you might get a risk.
Let me go real quick down the line. Frederick wants to know, did you guys get vaccinations when you were little? We'll start with Joel, go down the line. The no vaccine. Joel, were you vaccinated?
I think I received very few because in the early
next.
50s there were not many.
Yes or no?
I got 2 vaccines.
I'm completely vaccinated.
Yes, complete vaccine.
Everyone vaccinated. Okay. All right. Well, that's it. We're going to have to cut it off right there. That's it for this edition of Let It Rip Weekend.
Fox News Sunday is next. Remember, head over to fox2detroit.com for all the news of the day.